All right, so this is visualize a clock. And as I go through 1 through 11, picture like the hero's journey on a soul level as an individual who left the oneness, became the individual, took the ultimate hero's journey to forget the oneness, and go through all the stages of development of ego and forgetfulness and the illusion and the veil and all the different things, that to reach 11 o'clock and then turn around and go back and clean it all up and extract all the lessons and all the gold from all the karma and all the experiences to come back to 12 o'clock, which is equivalent to center. And that it's also congruent with being your soul self, your essence self, that anytime you are on any time frame on this clock, so anytime you're operating in your life and you're experiencing some dynamic that isn't in your wholeness, that isn't your essence, that isn't soul level remembrance of who you really are as a soul, as a beautiful whole being, as both the soul self and the oneness self in the higher version, in alignment with the essence expression, that anytime you're not that you're likely playing out an unresolved part or dynamic of the 12 phases within this clock, within this hero's journey. And so you could stop at any moment and use this clock to go, okay, what time frame am I on? It's like in Doctor Strange, they go to an alternate reality, and in that reality, green means stop and red means go, and he almost gets run over. Same shit happens in this reality. If you're at 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 or 9 or 11, everything operates differently there. It's when you're at 12 o'clock that, and in your center, as your sovereign self, with your highest self, with the highest expression of who you are, that things work properly. Things work in harmony and in synchronicity with your soul expression. And so anytime we're not in center, we're not at 12 o'clock, we can stop and go, okay, what time, which one of these stages am I in right now? And what can I do to come back to center? So stage 1 or 1 o'clock, separation from the one. The first experience that a soul undergoes is the perception of separation from spirit or mother, father, God source. This is the original soul trauma any soul may encounter from the experience of incarnation. At this point, the soul may feel lost. So the very first abandonment wound, the very first wound for every one of us was on a soul level when we separated from source. And we may feel lost. So that's 1 o'clock. Now 2 o'clock, duality of spirit. The soul perceives itself to be on its own and must lead a life on its own. Right? So connect with all the what times and ways you tried to create without God, without source, without divinity, without your higher self. Just like it's up to me. It's kind of like, imagine if a child lost their parents at a young age, like an Aladdin type story. He lost his parents and now he's just scrounging in the streets. That's 1 o'clock, right? He's separated from source. And now 2, it's like, well, I guess it's up to me. What goes on for like, what was that, Slumdog Millionaire, right? That type of energy. That's the type of energy we go into in 2 o'clock, the second stage of the hero's journey for the soul. is it's all up to me. I'm all alone. I've got to survive. I don't even know who the fuck I am or what happened to source, but here I am and it's up to me all by myself, right? So duality of spirit, the soul perceives itself to be on its own and must lead a life on its own. 3 o'clock, the fall of consciousness. The need for preservation becomes now a dominant one, and this is when the fall comes in and the service to the small self. So the small self, the scared one, the sad one, the one that didn't get enough love, the one that feels traumatized, abandoned, alone, hurt, betrayed, like life's against it, like life's happening to me, all the things. And now I start to go into survival. How do I survive? It's all about fucking survival, all based on fear and survival. 4 o'clock, fear of the unknown. And when I'm saying the clocks, remember, this is just like step 4 in the hero's journey of the soul, right? So step 4, 4 o'clock, fear of the unknown. As the soul is no longer surrounded by the abundant flow of the primordial source, there is a fear that arises, the fear of the unknown. The soul becomes very afraid. 5 o'clock, veils of the soul. Due to the fear, the veils of the soul arise here, and the soul becomes enveloped in them. This prevents the soul from seeing and perceiving God any longer and creates a feeling of unworthiness and abandonment. This is the conception of many of the core wounds. This is where a lot of souls start to forget their past lives, their journeys throughout lifetimes, and these veils disconnect the soul also from other realms of consciousness. Right? When I think of this, I think of my 5-year-old. He's, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he was pretty much connected to all these things and saying all kinds of profound things. Now I'm starting to hear him more speak to human conditioning and the beliefs of his separateness. He's forgetting. I can see it, even though I've gone to great lengths to provide an amazing atmosphere for him. Okay, so 6 o'clock, misuse of energies. As the veils of the soul are created, then there is a misuse of energy. This is the full physicalization of an aspect of the soul as it falls from grace. When the soul is no longer in control and the ego starts playing out its actions in incarnated state, that is when it descends even further. This is where the core wounds are established. It begins to be seduced by the senses. The perception of these scenes become physicalized, and it learns to interpret time and space and forgets the laws of the universe. It holds the perception of self-preservation because it wants to preserve itself. It loses its sense of divine order. This is the final level of the ego.
Would you call that sin?
It would fit because it has a little note here, edging out God, ego edging out God, right? And sin being missing the mark, right? But then when it's talking about the senses, and what I've been studying from Yogananda's work is there's, and so some of the other things I'm studying is saying that the sight senses, our 2 eyes, are the thieves. That the Christ, if you look at the pictures of Christ on the cross, it shows him in the center, and then slightly below it shows 2 thieves. Christ here, thieves here. Right? And so that's the stories, the beliefs, the separateness, the ego, right? Like that's the thieves right here. And so if we go into the senses, we start to make every decision based on samskaras of what we want less of and what we want more of, right? So whatever experiences we had in the past, we developed samskaras. If it was too much to take in, a blockage came into our being, our body, our lower self. And so if it was a very positive experience that was too much to take in, it becomes a block. If it was a very negative experience, too much to take in, it becomes a block. But then those formulate our new cravings and aversions, or what we long for and what we long not to have, what we long to have and what we long not to have, what we resist and what we must have, right? And so that's really anchoring in at that point, is that I start to believe that if I have the strength of Rambo and the fast cars, that, you know, whatever we saw at that time I was watching Rocky and Rambo and shit, right? So I thought that if I had those fast cars and the sexy chicks and the six-pack abs and the inhuman, superhuman strength, and then I was gonna, you know, it's all senses. What can I smell, taste, touch, feel, see, hear? And we become addicted to chasing the hormones that those senses bring, the chemicals that Matthew and I, you know, many of us have studied, serotonin, dopamine, etc. Right? So we've just become fascinated with the senses, and it's distracting us from source. So 7 o'clock, victim of entropy. The soul fell from grace, has completely re-identified with the ego construct and lost the sense of divine order and forgets the laws of the universe. When they are in a victim state, they ask, why is this happening to me? Why is life happening to me? Because their soul has not made that connection that goes beyond the ego construct and back to its original spirit. Original spirit would be the oneness, right? Source. Soul is like a section of source that was separated off as your individuality. Spirit would be the still oneness of source, that is the part that is still one with you and all, but the soul is just your individual uniqueness. 8 o'clock, false perceptions of the senses through the ego defense mechanisms, and false perception of the senses. The perceptual compass becomes so miscued that the extrasensory perception that is innate and inborn into every soul is unable to be truly realized into the physical vessel. The false perception of the senses has completely dulled the true senses that are available. So I've lost my intuition, my connection with source and spirit. I've lost the true definition of who I really am. I'm so caught up in the character we call me that all I'm trying to do is find some sense of meaning and purpose and fulfillment in the senses. Sex, drugs, alcohol, money, stuff, right? Experiences. So 9 o'clock, ignorance of self. What comes from that false perception is that it is no longer a soul construct, because the soul's light is still outside of the body at that moment and is more of an ego construct that has that self-identification, which becomes the ignorance of self. It gets a false perception of it even still being a soul. It becomes more chained to the reoccurring samskaras of incarnation after incarnation, and it forgets its true origins completely. As the concept of Maya arises in this aspect from the karmic development of the soul, at this level, the soul has completely forgotten it is a spiritual being, its origins of being a part of God, and has become now an ego construct that creates the attachment to illusion. So the piece about Maya is essentially, there's a story of like, there was a God self that was just one and didn't have any individual self-expressions, that created what they call the Maya. And the Maya was like a feminine version of the God self. And she said, let's play a game of hide and seek. And she said, I'm not going to tell you the rules. I need you to create a few things to make this possible. and I'm kind of slaughtering this story because I don't know it really well. So know that I'm paraphrasing and it's much more in depth than I can do. So she got different powers and authorities from him and essentially told him afterwards, like, hey, the game is, I'm going to try to distract you. Your job, I'm going to make you forget who you are. Your job is to find yourself and remember who you are. My job is to do every fucking thing I can in the universe to distract you a million ways from Sunday from doing that. That's like the ultimate game of hide and seek. You're going to forget who you are, and I'm going to do everything to keep you from doing that. You will remember, you will get back, but I'm going to do everything I can to keep you. That's the Maya it's talking about. So with that in mind, I'll go back and reread it. 9 o'clock, ignorance of self. What comes from that false perception is that it is no longer a soul construct because the soul's light is still outside of the body at that moment and is more of an ego construct that has. So if you think about this, like if your soul vibrates at a high frequency, the more you sink into ego and vibrate at a lower and lower frequency, it almost feels to me like it's suggesting the soul kind of is like hanging out outside of your body for the most part, because the frequencies don't match. So it's only like staying there enough to function, but not like being to be submersed in your bullshit. So its fault gets a false perception of even still being a soul. It becomes more chained to the reoccurring samskaras of incarnation after incarnation, and it forgets its true origins completely. As the concept of Maya, the temptress, the person who keeps you forgetting and distracted in every million ways, arises in this aspect from the karmic development of the soul. At this level, the soul has completely forgotten it is a spiritual being, its origins of being a part of God, and has become now an ego construct that creates the attachment to illusion. 10 o'clock, attachment to illusion. As the Maya continues to increase, the soul begins the cycle of death and rebirth, where it believes it is completely separate from all other souls it encounters along its path. At this level, the soul's job is to embody as many expressions and experiences of the soul extension as it is able to in order for it to purify, for it to release the original fall and return home. The soul's journey is to wake up its lower function. There is only 30% of the soul in the physical body, and thus the only way out is to wake itself up out of the illusion by purifying itself, by sending synchronicities for the human consciousness to start listening again to the soul's voice and start connecting to its higher aspects. This is the only way out. If this does not occur, what happens is the misuse of the life purpose. 11 o'clock, misuse of life purpose. The soul becomes so embedded in the collection of all the woundings and traumas that it does not even know that it has a purpose. It forgets its purpose, which is to wake up and go back to its origins. At the 11 o'clock hour, it does not remember it has a purpose. It feels even completely unworthy of having any purpose because of the woundings, the false perceptions of the senses, and the actions it has taken as self-preservation. 12 o'clock, return to spiritual order. If you return to 12 o'clock, it allows you to go back into your center, back to spiritual order. That is your go-to. So now the rest of what I add here isn't in that lesson or from those same teachers. It's a lesson I read in Autobiography of a Yogi that I listened to more than any other part of the book because it was so loaded and fascinating. Essentially, it said, we reincarnate from this life in between the earth realm and the astral realm over and over again until we graduate that realm. And then we move on from astral to causal and causal to oneness with source while still maintaining our own identity. It goes into a lot of details about that are super fascinating. The thing that I felt when I read this content for the first time was that we don't actually come from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then hit 12, that we actually, when we reach that darkest hour of those last moments of totally fucking lost and don't even feel worthy, don't know who we are, don't know why we're here, don't feel worthy of even having a purpose, that we don't continue on to 12. I think we actually turn around. We face it all. We extract all the gold, the lessons, the gifts, the beauty that was in all of the pain and the loss and the separation and the bullshit. And we sort it all out and we come back to 12 from back where we were. That it don't stay in a loop, that it feels to me like if you died, if you get that 11 o'clock hour where you so don't know who the fuck you are and you die, that you're just go to the astral plane, get a reset, and pretty soon you're back here again, starting over 12 o'clock and going through that timeline again. But if you stop at that 11 o'clock and you choose to wake up and you choose to do your work and clean up your karma and meet your soul and commune with your divinity and with oneness and with God, as you begin to integrate that relationship with your true self and your highest self and all these things we've been talking about, that you actually go back through, clean it all up, come back to 12, and that's when we begin ascending up into mastery, into self-realization, into self-actualization, into Christ consciousness, and then even beyond that into oneness again. So that's my lesson on